So in this video we're going to be reviewing some of my old games. It's a little more than 45 minutes of gameplay, which is the same amount of time that each of my last 3 videos have come from. So if you haven't seen this list yet, you're probably going to need to study this list a little bit. And I was going to explain at the start of this video what each of these things is, but I'm not going to. This video is only for people who have watched the previous videos, and who know what these things are already. So we're going to watch my gameplay and see how much these things happen. My last video on the tournaments ended up with about 100 clips, ignoring the fact that several of the tournament clips have multiple things in them. So besides this first MLG game, the rest of the games were chosen at random. There's one on Construct, Narrows, and Heretic, and I haven't watched any of these games yet since developing this list. A brief disclaimer, I really was quite washed up by the time I was 30, so these games could be pretty bad. And I am legitimately like a recovering alcoholic, and I used to drink a lot when I would play, so I could have been very drunk for some of these games too. That's my other excuse. Also, we all know that individually, there's a big difference between how well you play when you're playing the game 40 hours a week, and when you only play the game once or twice a week for a couple hours. Most players, or probably every player, can't just put the game in once a week and be exactly as good as they always are. Probably not legit, right? Maybe some of these Twitch streamers are playing a lot and not streaming, but it's interesting. Anyway, these games might be terrible. Okay, let's go. Connection's pretty bad, obviously. That's nice, I can use that excuse. So it didn't turn to that player or anything. That seemed a little fast. My teammate had just died down there, and maybe I heard that guy shooting or something. So I can see him at 14. And I stopped my aim at 27. So 217 milliseconds. That's pretty reasonable, but I do get the vertical elevation correct. But it's also the elevation I had my reticle at to begin with. It wasn't this long elevation change in a straight line that happens to hit a player. So because there's no vertical adjustment, so actually I go down very slightly here before I make the movement. So we'll put that one down. So here I do it again. I think this is the grenade here. But that would be pretty fast to be reaction time. This is kind of like ones where a player's turning to look down a hallway, where they're looking in a pretty small area for something specific, in this case the ramp, so this type of thing is obviously more likely to happen. It's not just me turning into the open area of the map and hitting a player. But we can count that one. But turning right two players, especially in those situations, is one of these indicators that if that was the only thing the player ever did, I wouldn't accuse them, because obviously it's going to happen just in the natural course of gameplay. Many of these indicators are like that, but it's something the aimbot does constantly. I'm kind of surprised we've seen two of these that quickly, so I guess we'll see what happens. Wow, this game ran bad. What a strafe. That vertical movement was a little wonky and a little sharp, but I wouldn't make a clip out of that.
Killing frenzy. Flag taken. Flag taken. Flag taken. Flag drop. Flag taken. Flag drop.
Maybe I hit that one player's center line behind the box there, but I didn't really stab at him. And there's three players there, and my aim is just kind of going all over the place. So I'm just going to call this random.
Flag taken.
It might be easy for me to miss things because I'm not watching it with a critical eye, because I know I don't cheat. If you see anything you think I missed, leave it in the comments if you would. This one is borderline. I was going to say this might be moving my aim in the wrong direction and snapping to the second player who's behind the box, but there's a third player here near the flag, and it's hard to tell if I can see that player or not. Like that's him, I think. The resolution's pretty bad though, so I could be reacting to that player. It's hard to say. So I might have been surprised by that player and reacted that way, so I wouldn't clip this. So this isn't a snap to center line, but I would call this one a pre-aiming. Again, it's on the ramp, and I might have heard this player shooting or something, so we'll count it. But again, it's one of these ones that if this was the only thing the player was doing, I wouldn't accuse them. Maybe a very brief off-tracking. But our motion might not be divergent. He's moving up the ramp, but I'm moving forward. But it's pretty close, so it's not quite a snap. I go past the center line and then back down to the player, but given that it appears to off track a little bit, we can call this a snap to center line instead of turning to a player, with a snap to center line being worse, but I wouldn't call this off tracking because the motion might not be divergent. There I was just trying to see if I pre-aimed at that player at any time, and I definitely didn't.
Flag taken. Flag dropped. Dropped. Flag dropped.
That was maybe a little weird because there happens to be a player down here, but I could have just been checking the map.
Flag taken.
Here we can see I try to shoot the player at the edge of the box, not at some position past the box where I can't hit him.
Flag taken. Flag. Flag recovered. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag. Flag taken. Flag captured.
This one's kind of borderline. But I might be getting aim assistance there. I don't think you would call this a series of target locks. This is happening a little bit more than I expected. I see him at 59. And start tracking at 8. 150 milliseconds. That's getting to be pretty fast. And this is definitely an off tracking, but we're both strafing the same direction. You can see as soon as my strafe stops, my reticle and the target start to diverge. So 150 milliseconds is pretty fast, so we can call this hitting a center line. There was no off tracking though. A good player can react to things in 150 milliseconds sometimes, so I wouldn't see a clip like that and conclude that someone was cheating, but we'll count it. That snaps past the player pretty clearly, and there's no off tracking.
Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered.
That was pretty weird. I wouldn't call this pre-aiming because the guy's on the ramp, and my aim doesn't really snap, it's just freely moving. Not exactly cursive writing, it's not flowing. But there's a lot of little movements in there. These are actually pretty fast, but you can see that they're not really straight. They're not a bunch of straight lines that switch directions. You can see there's curvature in there, and things are blended together a little bit. The wonkiness starts at about 46 and ends at about 17, so that's about a half second. And I would say it's about 5 or 6 different movements. You can have 5 or 6 different movements in a half second if they're blended together. You can't have 15 in 1 second that are not blended together. So yeah, that was a bit wonky. I would probably notice something like that, but it's not breaking any sort of speed limit or anything.
Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag reset. Flag dropped. Double kill. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Killing spree. Flag taken.
What a strafe.
Flag taken. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Double kill. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag taken. Flag taken.
So here my aim goes pretty wonky when this player dies, but it's obviously just me becoming wild because I'm losing aim assistance. It's not like my aim is locked on this player and then does one of these textbook movements we keep seeing. The really accelerated or violent movements, the sudden popping. It's just me going from being a shit show to more of a shit show. And this is another collection of pretty fast movements, but it's not as fast as the one from Clutch, for example. And it's 3 movements, and the last 2 seem to be blended together a little bit. So this one is pretty wonky, but again, it's not exactly what we've been seeing, right?
Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag taken. Flag taken. Taken. Flag taken.
That's far enough off, I wouldn't call that turning to this player or hitting their center line.
Flag recovered. Flag dropped. Flag taken.
Here it seems like I'm changing my mind quickly, but this is different from what we've been seeing. This is just a player surprising me again. Do you see any off-target locks in there? I would say this isn't quite close enough to his center line to count this one. The snap stops about here, and then after that it seems to be motion. The aiming release on that kill was a little wonky. I'm probably tracking here just with my motion though, so it's not in the opposite direction that I might have moved my aim, which would have been right if I thought I might be missing here. But that one's pretty wonky, so we'll count that one. So I can see him at 24. My aim starts to go up at 29. That's too fast, so this had to be random. It's interesting that I decided that player might be up high. If this was just to the player in the base, maybe I would count it, but again, it's one of these ones where I'm checking a very small specific feature, where if there is someone there, they're likely to be in a confined area. But since my aim does go up that fast towards the second player who's higher, I would call this one a little suspicious. but maybe not since I don't really hit either of these players' center lines. Yeah, I don't hit either player's center line. I'm quite a bit off actually, so I wouldn't count this. I'm not going to be counting extra shooting when I'm killing a player either, when the game's running this badly. I don't usually count those ones anyway. This snap is not even close to this player's center line. You can see this player jumping in front of me makes me lose aim assistance. It doesn't cause my aim to accelerate in strange ways or to stutter.
Flag. Flag taken.
Or I might have been reacting to my teammate.
Flag taken.
This one's close. I definitely go past the player, and there's no off tracking. The immediate off tracking is what really makes these worse, because it doesn't just require you to turn to them randomly, which can happen. It's that you also randomly are doing exactly what you needed to do to track them, especially in those cases where they're turning the corner to players, and it's not like maybe they saw them in their field of view as they're turning. So those should be very rare. We maybe had one of them in this video. I can't quite remember. It was maybe the one with 150 millisecond reaction time, but since reaction time wasn't exceeded, I'm obviously not going to accuse a player for that happening one time.
Flag taken. Flag stolen. Flag wrong. Flag recovered.
But that was pretty close to center line. I can see the player at 21. Aiming input stops at 27, so too fast to be reaction time. We can call this hitting player center line.
Flag taken. Flag stolen.
I can see the player's shadow there. There I can see his foot. So we'll say 40. So this one's well within reaction time. So that was the first game. So let's check the indicator tally. So that was 15 minutes, so we should have been up to 33 clips. But after thinking about it a little bit, I said there was 100 clips in the last MLG video, but there were a lot of clips with 2, 3, or even 4 different things in them. So if we round up to 1.5 indicators per clip, that's actually 150 indicators. So we should have seen 50 in this game, and our tally is 6. And of the 5 turning to players or snapping to center line, I think there was only 1 or 2 where the player wasn't in a hallway or on a ramp, and those ones I'm not going to count in isolation. I probably have clips in my previous videos talking about those. It's such a pattern with these players, and they're doing it in situations where it isn't a player on some little feature, so it makes more sense to me in those cases to just include all of them. But if a player did that 4 or 5 times in a 15-minute game, and almost all of those times their target was in a hallway, I'm not going to be accusing them of cheating. The pros are getting good callouts, and the games are more structured, so that stuff would happen more in their gameplay, but we obviously didn't see anything like we're seeing in the tournaments in my gameplay. And we definitely didn't see any smooth flowing movements, right? Maybe it's just because I suck. Or maybe the dead zones were really large. Let's see what Google says. Halo 3 on the Xbox 360 had a 27% axial dead zone. I actually think that seems high. I doubt it's really that high, but it was high. You can't put your controller, probably even now, on a 27% dead zone and then do cursive writing. So probably not an issue with my thumb. Do I have the best thumb in the world? Probably not. But I can do smooth flowing movements with a 0% dead zone now. So, and also, when we watch the pros play, they are navigating the map and doing their turns in these short, discrete movements. And if their thumbs were capable of these smooth flowing movements on the 360, why aren't they navigating the map with smoother movements that are blended together? And I'm showing you why. You can't do those smooth flowing movements with your thumb on a 360. You can't do them with a 27% dead zone, which again I think is high. I would say it was probably more like 15%, but I'm not sure. We've seen movements in the tournament that you're not going to touch with 15% either. So yeah, we saw 6, we should have seen 50, and many of these I wouldn't have counted in isolation if the player wasn't doing the more suspicious ones too. And obviously many of these we didn't see. Definitely no vertical chopping. That shit never happens. No back and forth movements that were too sharp. No stuttering. No target locks. There were lots of axial movements in there, but none of those series of really quick ones. Tiny fast circles or loops. Not even close. Oddly delayed reaction time. We didn't see any of that. We didn't see me pre-aiming and then waiting over a half second to shoot the player. It just seemed like someone playing Halo on the 360, right? And maybe you can see what I mean when I say that the aim was kind of smoother than on MCC. Like it's rough and sloppy, but it's slow and sluggish in a way. The reticle doesn't snap around or move around really sharply and really quickly like it does on MCC. That's what I meant by it kind of being smoother. So when you watch a player like Hysteria and his aim is glitching all over the place, hitting players and then not hitting players, things like that happen on MCC, but Halo on the 360 didn't work like that. And we're on to the next game. So I swapped this construct game out because it wasn't a BR start, if anyone is wondering why the total length changed. and that game had a couple players AFK. Like there, you can see that when this player goes out of view, nothing happens to my aim. My aim doesn't catch, it doesn't pop, it doesn't stutter. A player going out of view should never seem like it causes something to happen in your aim. Maybe that was a little target locky at the end there. Delayed reaction time too. That's delayed enough that I might count it. I might have just been drinking a beer though. I wasn't exactly on the main stage. So there are two target locks there at the end, but we're both jumping the same direction, so it's not that bad. But with that and the delayed reaction time, we can count this one. I probably wouldn't make a clip out of this though. Our motion isn't divergent during the locks, and it just took me a while to react to this player like I was doing something else. Actually, I'm not going to count this one. The target locks happen because our motion is mirrored, and my reaction time is so delayed here that it's pretty clear I was doing something else. It's not one of these cases where I'm actively engaged in something, or where I've reacted to a player and have aimed at them, but then I wait a long time to shoot. It's pretty clear that I just wasn't reacting to anything on screen. So obviously I moved my aim in the wrong direction here, and then my corrective snap is accurate. I can see this player at 45. And I start moving my aim in the wrong direction at 04, so 317 milliseconds. And I start shooting at this player and moving my aim back towards them at 06, so that's 350 milliseconds. So obviously this clip is within normal ranges because I wasn't cheating, but that is pretty slow, and I've probably counted some of those, so we'll count this one. This is a pre-aiming that I've probably been counting, but again, it's one of these ones with players in a hallway, and that's going to happen sometimes. But we'll count it. Some of these we're going to excuse because I'm playing with radar, and this one is one of those. Nowhere near as sharp of a back and forth as we've seen from Walshy or Hysteria. Not really that sharp, and I almost always played with a sensitivity of 6. Very rarely I would play on 5. In my prime I was experimenting with 7, but the vast majority of my gameplay was on 6, just for the record. Again, there are things like this that we're just going to have to excuse because I'm playing with radar, and I miss this player anyway. We can call that a hanging stab. It's not with the BR, but that was pretty similar, so we'll count that one. I'm surprised that's even in there, to be honest. We can talk about that later. I am 100% sure these players are cheating, but some of this stuff I've been learning too as we go. I've talked about this before, where most of what I know about how this aimbot works came from studying the old montages, so going back and seeing it in NLG gameplay is making me notice a lot of things that weren't in the montages, but might not be as suspicious as I thought. But my aim seems to rise and stall in the same place, and if I had a BR here, I would definitely count that. We have a collection of pretty fast movements here again, but you can see the last two are blended. So if we check the numbers on this, this seems to be 3 movements, and it starts at 25. Because some of the movements are blended together, the movements can be a lot faster. With clutches movements, for example, I'm taking issue with the speed of the movements because they're not blended together. And since 2 of these 3 movements are blended together, checking the speed doesn't really matter. That's more of an issue when it's obvious that all of the movements are straight lines with no blending, because the thumbstick has to return to the dead zone before each movement. Maybe that sounds a little hand wavy, but hopefully you can see the difference between that movement and one of these ones we see, where it's really clearly sharp straight lines. After you've watched enough of this stuff, you can tell there's a difference. That was a little weird. I was probably expecting that player to die, and then was reacting to the fact that they didn't. But we can count it anyways, just to keep this competitive. That looks like an aiming reset to me. It's not one of those large, very robotic looking ones, but it's weird enough that I would count it. Do you see how ridiculous it would be to constantly be turning into the middle of construct, aiming directly at players? This shot is normal. It's to the player's position, but it doesn't hang, and it returns to the pre-firing position, but only by my motion, not by my aim. Players in a hallway, and I missed by quite a bit. I wouldn't count this as snapping to a player. And these movements are obviously wonky, and some of them are rounded, but it's not smooth and flowing. This one we'll have to excuse because of radar. That little back and forth is a little wonky, but it's not fast enough or large enough for me to consider it suspicious. Here our motion is mirrored. And with the radar, we really can't count this one. If that hit the player's center line exactly, I would count this one. This one looks a little suspicious at full speed, but my aiming movement stops here and I'm clearly missing by quite a bit. Or I should say my movement starts going down instead of right. So this movement is pretty suspicious. The follow-up is just missing, but that is a pretty sharp movement when I first lose sight of the target. And there's no dropped frames, so we'll count this one. This one has a little pop to it. It's not a stutter or one of these ones where my aim swings wildly halfway across the screen, but it's a little suspicious.
Remaining.
So that game was a little more than 7 minutes long, so we're up to 22 minutes. So to keep pace with the pros, we should have seen 73 indicators by this point. And we're at 12, with many of the pre-aimings being debatable. Next game.
Capture the flag.
That's far enough off, I'm not going to count that one. People might have a little more tendency to leave their bursts in one spot to complete than I realized. This still isn't a stab to a player behind a wall, and it's not a series of these hesitations, but it is a hanging shot, and that may be more common than I thought it was, so we'll count that one. That's maybe getting close to an extra shot, but the game runs so bad online, and my internet was never that great, and it seems like I knew there might be a player here, so I won't count this one. If I had started to turn before the burst completed, I might count it. That guy is clearly cheating.
Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag captured. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag captured.
Wasn't even close to pre-aiming at this player. That one's within reaction time.
Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag taken.
Close to extra shooting again, but it is when I'm killing a player and the game's running pretty bad. I'm not moving my aim off the player during the previous burst, so I'm not going to count it.
Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag taken. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag dropped. Flag dropped. Drop. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag stolen.
This is a little wonky here, and there's a couple target locks, but our motion is mirrored again. I would probably at this point just say that lots of target locks isn't suspicious unless motion is divergent. They pretty much shouldn't happen when motion is divergent, because the scale of things that happen in the game is beyond people's ability to make those adjustments with a 360 controller, and if it wasn't, they would miss a lot less than they do, and again, they wouldn't be navigating the map with movements that aren't blended together at all.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Drop. Flag.
This one again in full speed looks similar to the stuff we've been seeing. But my aiming input stops there, and I'm missing by quite a bit still.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen.
I knew that player might be back there and got lucky, but that movement was coincidental, and it stopped right when I hit the center line, so we'll count that one. This category is another one of these that's going to happen, but that I wouldn't accuse a player for, and one one that I probably wouldn't even mention if a player wasn't doing it constantly.
Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Killjoy. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered.
There's 2 players here, and nothing weird happens with my aim. It doesn't stutter, it doesn't quickly snap from one player to the other, etc. This was a little weird, but I'm not hitting either of these players, and there's no off tracking either. Probably getting aim assistance there. Missed center line, and they're on the ramp. It may be off tracks a little, but I might be moving down the surface at the same time. This is a windmill, and it's elliptical. It's not a tiny fast circle. and it's fast. It's not slow and even, and there's a little bit of acceleration at the start, I think. Maybe you could call that snapping to a second player, but I'm just missing and getting lucky. And the rest is just wonkiness. There's 2 axial movements in there, but 2 axial movements at that speed is common. I might be getting aim assistance on that. But maybe not. And then it seems like I might hit this player's center line at L2. But I go past it quite a bit. So this one seems a little suspicious, but there are 3 targets in a small area, and I'm moving my aim around so much that's not real surprising that something like that would happen, but we'll count this as 1. You could maybe call that extra shooting, but obviously I'm no shields and I'm just spazzing out. I can see this player's leg at 39. And this is one where I might have been making this turn anyway. And I hit the player at 51, so 200 milliseconds, which is fine.
Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Oh! Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Oh! Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag. Flag.
That's just normal reaction time stuff. This one again is just panicking and reacting to things reflexively.
Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered.
There's a little snapback on that, but that's actually quite a bit slower than the ones we've been seeing. Not even close.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag captured. Flag stolen. Flag captured. Flag. Flag stolen. Flag captured. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. 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 Flag recovered.
I make a little movement here before I jump, so between that and how aligned it ends up being with this player, I would probably count this as a pre-aiming.
Recovered.
This one's far enough off center line, I wouldn't count it. There was a hesitation in my shooting there. And a little bit of a snapback. That snapback is pretty borderline in terms of being in the range that's just kind of general wonkiness. And the hesitation is weird. I was probably drunk and just didn't pull the trigger all the way. I probably wouldn't make a clip out of this. Sometimes players just fail to pull the trigger, but also the textbook case is when the target is going out of view, but only partially, and the player is clearly not shooting because the part of the body they're targeting is going out of view, even though they could make an adjustment and still try to shoot. That's the textbook case. and that's not what this is. This could just be a failure to pull the trigger, but with a snapback we can count this. We're obviously not going to get to 150, and everything in these games so far is not something I would accuse a player for in isolation. This one's close, but it's obvious I'm just aiming at that spot and not at the player who's moving into that spot. That's not quite getting kicked out into an accurate movement. I get kicked out and then I make the movement. That little movement up and down is probably the closest thing I've seen to a vertical chop, but you can see it's pretty small. There's only one, and it's really not that sharp. I'm not moving my aim before the extra shot while the previous burst is completing, and honestly, my tolerances for extra shooting would be much more lenient on the 360 and peer-to-peer than they are for LAN or MCC. Things were pretty laggy, and you had to shoot elites 10 times to make sure they would die. That one we can count. I'm not really sure what I was doing there. We're definitely counting this one. There's even some off tracking when motion might be divergent. I can see him at 55. And my aim stops at 5. That's 167 milliseconds. So not breaking any limits there, but that 10/60ths of a second is kind of the cutoff point for me, where anything below that I consider pretty suspicious, especially if it's happening constantly. So this one doesn't quite exceed reaction time, but given the off tracking, we'll count this one.
Drop. Flag. Take. Flag. Drop. 5 minutes remaining.
It's not a perfect off tracking. You can see that there's a very slight divergence. And he seems to be running forward, but he's not looking straight forward, so he might not be moving at full speed. And I'm strafing left. You can see this line on my reticle. Pretty much points at this middle line on his pauldron. And then my aim is going to drift slightly right from there. Within 2 frames, it's pointing at the first pauldron. So not a perfect off tracking. We'll still count it though, but it's not as bad as some of the ones we've been seeing.
Drop. Flag. Take. Flag. Drop. 5 minutes remaining. Flag. Take. Flag. Drop. 5 minutes remaining. 5 minutes remaining. Flag.
I've said it once and I'll say it again. This game ran like shit.
Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Taken. Flag. Taken. Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Taken. Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Drop. Flag. Taken. Flag. Captured.
I can see this player at 56. And I hit their center line at 02. So we'll call this snapping to center line. But yet again, it's when the target is in a narrow part of the map. That one's getting pretty close to extra shooting. It could just be a shitty pre-firing attempt here, so I probably wouldn't count this one.
Flag drop, flag stolen, flag drop, flag stolen, flag stolen, flag dropped, flag dropped, flag recovered.
This one I'm missing by too much, so I'm not going to count it.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag flag.
That's pretty wonky, and maybe axial. But really only the last two are fast, and they're not too fast. I would definitely say that snap hits that player, so we'll count that one. Again, it's in a confined part of the map.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag
This one is not so much a snap, it's more of a gradual turn, and this player just happens to be in the door. But it is pretty close. And then my aim does pop a little bit, but I would probably call this free aiming, and we'll definitely count it. If I didn't think a player was cheating, I probably wouldn't count this. So I can see this player's shadow at 0, 0. And then I start the second movement at 18, so 300 milliseconds. So if I reacted slowly here, this might not be my aim going wonky because I'm losing sight of the player, and I can still see the part of the body that my aimbot would be targeting, so I might give a player a pass on this. But if you add these two borderline indicators together, we can count this as one.
Flag stolen. Flag. Reset. Flag taken. Flag drop. Flag.
I'll call that one an extra shot.
Flag drop. Flag recovered. 1 minute remaining. Seconds remaining. 30 seconds remaining. Seconds remaining.
This up and down is kind of sharp, but not something that I would make a clip out of. One like this is fairly common. It's not that really wide, sharp V that players are making as they turn.
Seconds remaining.
Not close enough to center line. This one's pretty borderline, but we can count it. On this one, I can see the player at 16. And my aim stops at 27, so 183 milliseconds. So pretty fast while turning at 30 frames per second, so we'll count this one too. And my aim was pretty wonky at the end there. Going back and forth repeatedly pretty sharply. So I'll count that one too. Okay, let's see where we're at. So I count 26, and we've reviewed about 37 minutes of gameplay. So we're at 26 indicators, and there should be 123. And again, there's many of these things that we're not seeing, like rubber banding, the recoil glitch. We haven't seen my aim stutter up and down frame by frame 4 times in the blink of an eye, for example. And still, most of the pre-aiming we're seeing is when targets are in confined spaces. I'm not pre-aiming to players in open areas, and we've still only seen 1 or 2 where there's pre-aiming and off-tracking, and I'm pretty sure both of those were debatable. So one more game.
Capture the flag.
So this game was only 3-on-3, but it's the longest CTF BR start I have on this map, and we're going to be over 45 minutes, so I'm just going to stick with this one.
Flag drop. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. 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 Flag flag up. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag recovered.
I'm not really sure what that was. In isolation, I'm not going to clip something like that. I'm just catching a little aim assistance there.
Flag drop. Flag recovered.
I could see where these bullets were coming from, but still this is right on the player, so I'd probably count this one. It's right on the player and it happens to track. So we'll count that one.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag. Flag dropped. Flags. Drop. Flags.
This one I can see this player for a long time, and there's radar.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped.
That's just like a fast half circle.
Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag.
But that might have snapped that player's center line, and that should be pretty rare. Close enough that I would probably count that. We can't see the player, so I wouldn't count this against someone for sure, but we'll add it to the tally.
Drop. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag spree. Flag recovered. Flag.
This extra shooting is pretty borderline too, and I only seem to do this when I'm finishing kills, but that one seemed pretty delayed, so we'll count it.
Flag taken. Flag stolen. reset. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered.
That movement's a little weird, but it's not sharp enough to be anything.
Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag stolen. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag dropped. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag taken. Double kill. Killing frenzy. Flag reset. Flag reset. Flag reset.
So I turned to that player pretty directly. But again, I'm just turning at the elevation my aim was at. I'm not taking off from this point with a new vertical angle that happens to hit a player at car 3 or something. But I do hit that player's center line. I can see them at 38. And it stops at 47, so probably not reaction time. I'm not completely sure about the sword reticle, but this might be off center line enough that I wouldn't count this, but we'll go ahead and count it.
Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag reset. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag recovered. Flag recovered. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Stolen. Flag dropped. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag
This one's borderline too, because I might just be adjusting to aim at the corner. I can see this player's foot at 03. And make the movement acquiring the target at 1/6, so this doesn't exceed reaction time. So I'm not going to count this one.
stolen. Flag dropped. Flag 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 stolen. Flag captured. Double kill. Ryan triple kill. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag dropped. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag captured. Flag taken.
Choke.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. 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 Flag recovered. Flag captured. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag taken. 5 minutes remaining. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag reset. Flag recovered. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag stolen.
That was a little wonky, and some of that acceleration I don't love, but obviously I'm not going to make a clip out of that.
Flag recovered.
This snap is way off the player.
Flag recovered. Flag recovered.
Not really sure how I managed to lose that one, but I did.
Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag taken. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag dropped. Flag stolen. Flag double kill. Flag reset. Game over. Flag captured. Flag double kill. Flag reset. Game over. Flag captured.
So there's our 49 minutes of gameplay. We'll keep the target number of indicators at 150 because this game had fewer players, but that's just a rough number anyway. Most of this stuff you're not going to find in legit gameplay at all, or you're not going to find it multiple times in a small amount of gameplay. So let's see what we had. 7 snaps to center line, maybe 1 with random off tracking, 1 sharp back and forth, 7 pre-aimings, again, most if not all, in situations where that's more likely to happen, 1 coincidental movement, 2 turning right 2 players, 3 weird aiming releases, 2 hanging stabs, but none of them were the textbook one that we keep seeing, 3 extra shots, but none of those were really bad. And I've probably said this before, but I wouldn't accuse a player for extra shooting alone. It's just something that the aimbot does a lot. 1 moving aim in the wrong direction, but that's something you'll see more of the slower a person's reaction time is, and the worse they are at the game. 1 indecisiveness, 1 delayed reaction time, but for the most part my reaction time was pretty consistent. You don't see me often reacting in 150 milliseconds, and then sometimes taking half a second to shoot at a player I already snapped to, and then 1 aiming reset, and it really wasn't a bad one. That sounded like a really terrible Christmas song. So we had 30 indicators, much less than 150, none of the textbook movements, and nothing I would accuse a player for. I hope this video was informative, and I hope it helped you to start seeing the differences. I definitely learned a little, because some of this list was stuff I was picking up on as I went, and some of these indicators I am going to be refining a little bit based on the gameplay we just watched, and hopefully I'll get to finishing this tournament soon. See you then.